My name is Laura Anderson. I'm 30 years old. I'm a part-time working wife, pregnant with a baby from my husband, Greg, who is 4 years older than me. I have a younger sister, Miley, who is 5 years younger than me. Miley is a beautiful woman, but she loves flashy things and is a bit of a flirt. Even though she's already 25, she still lives at home, barely working, just playing around, and she's jealous of me for marrying a high-earning man like Greg. Every time we see each other, she finds some excuse to cling to Greg with excessive physical affection. And she does it while wearing revealing clothes.
It's so nice, Laura. You got to marry such a wonderful guy.
Every time, I get angry and tell her to stop.
I'm not doing anything wrong. I just want to be close with Greg as his sister-in-law, but you're so jealous and hysterical. It's scary. If you keep that up, Greg might leave you, you know? You're already starting to get more wrinkles than me.
That's what Miley always says. Of course, Greg found Miley's behavior annoying and used to reject her. But recently, he's stopped outright rejecting her, and instead, he seems to be kind of enjoying it. On top of that, it seems like they're having friendly conversations when I'm not around. As soon as I show up, they both get awkward and stop talking. It's almost like they're secretly meeting behind my back. When I asked Greg about it, he just said, "Laura, she's your sister, and I can always outright reject her. I don't want things to get awkward." I see. I'm sorry for making you uncomfortable. I'll talk to Miley again.
No, it's fine. It's not a big deal. And I know you hate how Miley always makes snide remarks at you. Plus, it hurts my pride as a man to be constantly defended by my wife. I just want to keep the peace. Please understand.
I grew suspicious of Greg, who was adamant about not letting me intervene. Even though he seemed happy that I was pregnant, he wasn't very supportive. On days when he promised to go shopping for baby items or accompany me to the doctor, he would suddenly have to go somewhere.
Sorry, something came up at work.
In the end, I had to go shopping and to the hospital alone. Greg, with the way you usually act, do you really care about this baby?
Of course I do. But I have to work harder now to support our family. Please understand.
We had this argument over and over again. Even when we were home together, he seemed to be avoiding my eyes and was often texting someone on WhatsApp. I became suspicious and hired a private investigator, hoping it was all in my head. The investigation revealed a shocking truth. Greg and my sister, Miley, were having an affair.
Miley, you're still the best. Way better than Laura.
Let's get married after you leave her.
Yeah, I want that too. But now there's a baby involved.
I found out they were texting each other, that he had been meeting Miley instead of going to work, and that they had been going to hotels together multiple times. Even though it was shocking, I wasn't all that surprised. In fact, I found myself thinking, I knew it. That's how suspicious I had been of them from the start. But still, I wished I had been wrong. Betrayed by both my husband and sister, I made up my mind. If that's the way it is, I might as well support these two thoroughly. That day, Greg canceled our plans to go shopping for baby items, saying he had to work on the weekend. Of course, work was just an excuse. He was planning to meet Miley. I had anticipated this from the beginning. Pretending to send Greg off with a smile, I secretly followed him. As expected, Greg headed in a completely different direction from his office and met up with Miley.
Sorry to keep you waiting, Miley.
Not at all. Let's hurry up and go check out our wedding venue.
Yeah, I can't wait for our wedding.
Let's make it way more extravagant than my sister's. We'll show her how it's done.
Miley clung to Greg's arm and rested her head on his shoulder as they headed towards a well-known wedding venue. As the two of them finished their venue tour and walked out of the wedding hall, still arm in arm, I accidentally ran into them. Greg, you. Drawing on the acting skills I honed in drama club back in school, I widened my eyes to the limit, feigning a look of shock. On the other hand, Greg and Miley were genuinely surprised.
Laura.
Laura, what are you doing here?
I had something to do nearby and just happened to pass by, and then I saw. I looked at Greg with teary eyes. He started to look nervous. So, Greg, you really do love Miley, don't you? You love her so much that you want to divorce me and marry her instead. And here I was, thinking that our baby was getting in the way. As I murmured this, gently stroking my belly, Greg began to panic.
No, it's not like that. Miley told me she's getting married to her boyfriend soon and needed my advice as a married man on picking a venue. So I was just here as her brother-in-law.
Greg desperately tried to lie his way out of it, but his excuse was flimsy. Miley getting married. Neither I nor our parents had ever heard anything about that. And if she needed advice for her wedding, why would she ask Greg instead of me, her own sister? Especially in secret, with just the two of them. While lying about it being work. It was clear that something was off. I purposely let my voice tremble as I spoke. It's okay. You don't have to lie. I've actually known for a while about your relationship. I was too scared to confront it, but I didn't realize you were this serious about it. I choked up, pausing for effect. I'm sorry for not noticing sooner and for trying to hold you back. I even got in the way of you and Miley.
No, Miley was just a fling. You're pregnant, so I couldn't, you know. And I just gave in to temptation when Miley came on to me.
Please, don't lie for my sake. You've already made plans to divorce me and marry Miley, haven't you?
No, Miley was just being pushy. She kept saying she wanted to marry me, and I just got swept along with it. But I don't mean it. The one I really love is you, Laura. I'm not going to abandon our baby.
Greg's desperate words were probably true. He's always been easily swayed and tends to procrastinate dealing with difficult situations. Since we got married, I've been the one pushing him to take care of things, making sure they were handled quickly. He probably just got swept up by Miley's forceful personality this time. But I have no intention of letting him off the hook. This is all Greg's fault. And I'm done taking care of him.
What are you saying, Greg? You promised. You said you'd leave her and marry me. You even said we'd have a bigger wedding than Laura's. You told me over and over that you loved me more than her.
Miley screamed, shaking Greg as she did. Greg pushed her away.
Stop it. There's no way I can marry you. Laura's carrying my child. And besides, how could I possibly leave my wife for her sister and have a grand wedding? Think about how it would look. Use your common sense, you idiot.
What? That's awful.
Laura, you sound alright? I'll break up with Miley. So.
What the heck? This isn't what we agreed on.
Shut up.
The two of them started arguing loudly. As I watched them, I couldn't help but think how foolish my husband was, though Miley was no better. The moment he got involved with Miley and started talking about remarriage, it was obvious things would turn out like this. I decided to step in and stop their fight. Stop it. I don't want to see two people who love each other fighting.
Love each other.
Miley, don't misunderstand him. Greg is just too kind. He's trying to be considerate of me and our baby, so he can't be honest with you. But with you, he's shown his true feelings. After all, he's prioritized his dates with you over our baby. Did you know? We had plans to go shopping for baby stuff together today. But Greg canceled that to be with you, to check out wedding venues. That's how much he loves you. So don't worry, I'm giving him to you. When we were kids, I was always told, let your little sister have it. As your older sister, I'm letting you have Greg.
Hey, Laura, what are you saying? I told you, I have no intention of marrying Miley. The one I love is you, Laura.
Stop it. I know everything now, so there's no need to lie anymore. Please, don't make Miley cry.
Laura,
Greg desperately tried to convince me that he loved me and our baby and had no intention of being with Miley. But I repeated the same thing over and over. You don't have to lie. I know the truth. Make Miley happy. I wiped my eyes with a tissue, making a show of it. I love you more than anyone, Greg. And I pray more than anyone for the happiness of you and my dear sister. Goodbye, Greg. We won't see each other again after the divorce, but be happy.
Wait, Laura. Are you serious? What about the baby?
Don't worry about the baby. I'll raise him or her just fine on my own. Ever since you got demoted last year and your salary took a big hit, I've been earning more than you anyway. I can raise the child with the support of my family.
No way.
Hearing this, Miley shouted in disbelief. She must have been counting on Greg's salary. He must not have told her that he got demoted because of a major mistake at work. That mistake, too, was due to Greg's tendency to get swept along and procrastinate. Well then, goodbye. I'll tell our child that Daddy turned into a star in the sky. With tears in my eyes, I turned on my heel and got into the car. I drove straight to the family court to get the divorce papers and then headed to my in-laws' house. Greg's parents are really good people who've always treated me well. Even today, they were worried when I showed up unannounced, looking so distressed. I'm sorry for coming over like this, but I've decided to divorce Greg. I'm so sorry. It's all my fault.
Divorce, but you're pregnant. What on earth happened? What did our son do?
I showed them all the evidence of Greg and Miley's affair that the private investigator had gathered, including the fact that they were planning to get married after divorcing me and were already checking out wedding venues. After hearing everything, Greg's mother broke down in tears, while his father was furious.
That fool! What was he thinking? Of all things, he got involved with his wife's sister while she's pregnant. He's no son of mine.
I'm so sorry, Laura. I'm truly sorry. It's all my fault for raising him this way. I'll do anything to make it right. There's no way I'll let him marry your sister.
No, please let them get married. I truly want to support Greg and Miley's marriage. Both Greg's father and mother were stunned by my words.
Laura, are you serious?
I'm serious. Greg says that Miley, being pushy as she is, forced him to go so far as to tour wedding venues. He's claiming that the only person he truly loves is me, and that he's going to break up with Miley. That's exactly why I want them to get married. I can't imagine forgiving a husband who would cheat with my sister and staying with him. He needs to learn the hard way just how irreparable it is to betray his wife and easily turn to another woman. I'm sorry.
But are you okay with this? Your ex-husband and your sister being together?
I know Miley's true nature better than anyone else. If Greg marries her, he'll never be happy. Greg knows that too, which is why he's trying to avoid it. That's why I want them to be together. Please, support their marriage, both of you. I'm begging you. Seeing me begging repeatedly, my in-laws finally agreed.
Well, to make up for what our son has done, we'll do everything we can to support your wishes.
If you're that determined, I suppose we don't have a choice. We'll let the rest of the relatives know.
After they informed the other relatives and explained the situation, the entire family decided to support Greg and Miley's marriage, saying it sounded interesting.
Please, don't make me go through with the divorce. I promise I'll devote myself to being a good husband and father from now on.
Be honest with yourself. You have a wife who is willing to step aside and support your love. You won't find anyone better than that.
Surrounded by all the relatives, Greg was finally forced to sign the divorce papers with my name already filled out. I took the signed papers and said to Greg, who was now crying in defeat, "You're free now. You've finally managed to divorce me, so don't waste it. Make sure you marry Miley. And don't even think about getting divorced. If you marry Miley and stay married, I won't ask for alimony or child support from either of you." I immediately submitted the divorce papers to the family court. My in-laws paid the child support in one lump sum. Despite my attempts to refuse, they insisted I take it, saying it was the least they could do. I thanked them and promised to send photos of the child regularly. Still, Greg kept complaining.
People will talk if I divorce my pregnant wife and marry her sister.
But the relatives had a response for that too.
Who cares about what people think? Your love is what matters. Besides, doesn't a little scandal make things more exciting? Don't worry, we'll all be rooting for you too.
It seemed that Greg no longer had feelings for Miley, likely due to the shock of our divorce. And Miley wasn't too keen on the marriage anymore either, especially after learning about Greg's current salary and their big fight. Then, Miley's pregnancy was discovered. The entire family celebrated the arrival of a new life.
If there's a baby on the way, you've got to take responsibility as a man.
But Laura has a child too.
You've already divorced Laura, haven't you? Besides, Laura said she'd step aside for her sister and the baby. She's such an admirable person. Are you really going to leave Miley's child fatherless?
Be a good father to both children and make them happy.
With that, Greg reluctantly married Miley.
Just signing the papers. What about the wedding? You already went to look at venues. Weren't you planning on a wedding even bigger than your sister's?
It's a shame. We were looking forward to celebrating with you.
Even though the relatives encouraged them, Greg and Miley didn't seem interested in holding a wedding. Miley, who had been so eager for the wedding, was likely terrified by the situation. Still, after being disowned by her parents and having nowhere else to go, Miley seemed relieved to have married Greg. I took maternity leave and returned to my parents' home, where I gave birth with their support. It was a healthy baby boy. After my leave, I went back to work, with my parents taking care of my son in the meantime. Greg, shortly after marrying Miley, grew exhausted by her true nature. For one thing, she's a terrible cook, Greg had noticed that the meals she brought him before their marriage were actually all made by her mother. He was shocked to discover her atrocious cooking skills after they married. Unable to stand it any longer, Greg took over the cooking duties. Apparently, Greg often complains about missing my cooking.
You say that, but it's just another way of bragging. You must really love your wife.
If there's love, any meal should taste good.
With your love, I'm sure Miley's cooking skills will improve.
You shouldn't speak ill of Miley, who you fought so hard to be with.
Being beautiful and bad at cooking sounds like a cute heroine from a comic.
This is the newlywed life you dreamed of. If you keep complaining, you'll be punished for it.
Every time Greg grumbles, his relatives scold him with comments like these. The second issue is Miley's spending habits. Just like when he was with me, Greg let Miley manage the household finances. However, Miley had always been a big spender, even when she was living at home and barely working. At home, our parents had eventually cut off her allowance because they couldn't stand her wasteful ways. But after the marriage, even though Greg's salary was lower than she expected, Miley got her hands on his income and resumed her spending habits. In fact, the spending became even more excessive as a backlash against her previous restrictions. She even started using Greg's credit cards. Most of the money was spent on hosts, as Miley became obsessed with a top-ranked, handsome host who showered her with sweet words, filling the void in her cold marriage. Greg complained about this to his hometown friends.
You're the one who got involved with a woman like that, man. Maybe your new wife's just lonely? You better shower her with more love than that host does.
By this time, even his hometown friends, who had heard the rumors, were teasing him just like the relatives were. They were just as disappointed in Greg for getting involved with his wife's sister while his wife was pregnant. Miley continued to drain Greg's income and savings. Greg hoped that she would change once she became a mother. However, even after Miley gave birth to a healthy baby boy, she didn't change as Greg had hoped. Instead, she left the baby at home to continue her wild nights at the host clubs. Greg ended up having to raise the baby on his own. When he tried to ask his parents-in-law for help with the baby, they kept dodging his requests, leaving him with no time to go to work. This caused major problems with his job, and Greg, who had already been demoted, was further downgraded in his position. With Miley's spending habits driving him into debt and now facing another pay cut, Greg was desperate. He ended up dipping into company funds, got caught, and was fired.
What were you thinking? We just had a baby. How are we supposed to live from now on?
Shut up. Whose fault do you think it is that I had to embezzle? It's because you keep blowing all our money on hosts.
Don't put this on me.
It is your fault. We're broke because of you.
Maybe it's because you don't make enough. I thought you were making good money. Why didn't you tell me about the demotion?
You're a stay-at-home wife. No, not even that. You're just a jobless, host-obsessed bum. So don't act so high and mighty.
The argument escalated into a full-blown fight. Even then, the relatives told them, they say the more you fight, the more you care about each other. Don't worry, love will get you through it. There was another issue bothering Greg. The baby didn't look much like him. Or Miley, for that matter. Greg had a bad feeling, so he secretly did a DNA test. The results showed a 0% chance that the baby was his.
What the hell? Who's the real father?
Enraged, Greg confronted Miley. According to Miley, the child was the result of her affair with the host she was obsessed with, at the same time she was having an affair with Greg. When Greg found out, he couldn't take it anymore and ended up hitting Miley.
Can you believe it? I was forced to raise someone else's kid all on my own. I was made to marry Miley because of that kid. Please, you've had a child too, right? Miley's child isn't mine, but your child, that's definitely mine, right? Please, let me see him. I want to raise him as his father, and if possible, I want to get back together with you. I'll do anything.
As Greg begged over the phone, I calmly responded while soothing my child. This baby's daddy is gone now. He's become a star in the sky.
I'm alive. This child needs a father. Don't you feel bad for him?
You're right. My parents have been suggesting I find someone new. It doesn't have to be you.
No, I'm his real father.
You chose Miley over your own blood, over the child in my womb. Don't worry. Even if you're not related by blood, you can raise Miley's child. There are plenty of families out there without biological ties, and they still find love. If you think it's sad for a child to be without a father, don't you think it's just as sad for Miley's child? Do you really think Miley, with her spending habits, obsession with hosts, and terrible cooking, can raise a child on her own?
I don't think so, but...
Right? And besides, Miley is cut off from her parents because of the affair. So, she can expect any help from them. Miley and her son have no one but you. So, let's do our best with raising our kids each other. I hung up the phone. Even after that, it seemed Greg couldn't give up. This time, he went to his relatives, told them everything, and asked for a divorce.
You've raised that child even though you're not related by blood. You must have developed some affection for him.
You've done a great job raising a child on your own. You're already a father. Are you really going to abandon him? The child isn't to blame, so don't make him suffer. Get through this struggle and become a happy family.
Surrounded by his relatives and pressured, it seemed that Greg's resolve broke. And it's true that he was also worried about the kid after the divorce. However, Miley, still reeling from being hit, was screaming, "I'm the one who wants a divorce. I'll marry the host instead."
You're the one at fault here. What are you doing as a mother at your age? Get your act together. You stole him from your sister, so you better take good care of him. Think of it as atonement and dedicate your life to your husband and child for betraying them.
The relatives collectively scolded her until she cried, and it seemed Miley finally understood. Greg took control of the household finances, and with no money and the pressure from the relatives, Miley finally gave up her host club visits. She was even forced to block her handsome host on WhatsApp. Miley, told to atone for her actions by working as hard as she could, is now juggling multiple part-time jobs to pay off the debts. She's under strict surveillance with GPS tracking to ensure she doesn't cheat again. Not used to working hard, Miley makes a lot of mistakes and, due to her personality, is disliked and mistreated by the other part-timers, especially the women. But quitting isn't an option. The only comfort Miley has now is her child, who's starting to look more and more like the host. Greg managed to find a new job. Although their marriage remains cold, their child is growing up healthy and has taken to calling Greg dad and seems to be fond of him. Greg doesn't lack affection for the child, but as the boy grows and looks less and less like him and more like the host, it pains Greg. He lives in constant regret, thinking of the biological child I gave birth to. When my son was 2, I remarried through a match arranged by my father. My new husband had also been betrayed by his previous wife and divorced, so he understands me well. He's a department manager at a large company, earns a high salary, and above all, he's kind and sincere. He takes good care of my now 5-year-old son, who calls him dad and is very attached to him. He fully believes that my husband is his real father. One day, while my husband, son, and I were out for a walk, we saw a man walking towards us with a boy about the same age as our son. Maybe they were heading to the nearby park. The father walking toward us, with a young, handsome boy in tow, was none other than Greg. Greg was smiling at the innocent boy, but there was a shadow behind that smile. Greg soon noticed us, stopped in his tracks, and said,
"Oh, Laura."
After looking at my face, his eyes quickly shifted to our son, who was holding hands with my husband, and his eyes widened.
"Oh."
It was no surprise. Our son looked exactly like Greg.
Hey, Dad, what's wrong? We're going to the park, right?
Greg stared at our son, as if he couldn't hear the boy tugging on his hand. I smiled warmly at Greg and said, "Hello, it's such a lovely day." I spoke as if we were strangers. My husband, who knew the situation, also smiled and nodded at Greg.
Hello.
Our son, who has been taught to greet people cheerfully, also gave a lively greeting to Greg as if to set an example. Greg was the only one visibly flustered. The boy looked up at him with a puzzled expression. You have a lovely child."
"Oh,
"Well then."
Dad, it's hot. Can we get some ice cream?
As we passed by, my son tugged on my husband's shirt, asking for a treat. When I glanced back, I saw Greg being pulled along by his son, walking unsteadily as if in a daze. I thought about what must have been going through Greg's mind. That shadowed yet gentle smile he gave the little boy. What kind of internal struggle had he endured while raising a child that wasn't his? And then, just as he was trying to love and raise that child as a dad, he ran into us. A family with a boy who looked just like him. Seeing me interact so distantly with him, watching our son call another man dad, and witnessing how happy and well-off we looked, how must that have felt? I turned to look at my husband and son walking beside me, both radiating happiness with no shadow between them. They looked like a real father and son. Even though they weren't biologically related, the difference between them and Greg's situation was stark. There was a time when I wished Greg would suffer with Miley, that they would be unhappy. But now, we're incredibly happy. So, I no longer wish for Greg and Miley's unhappiness. Especially since the child is innocent in all of this. For the sake of the child, I sincerely hope they overcome their struggles and become a happy family.